This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is your show for October 4th, 2016, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hello.
And producer Pat.
Hi, everybody.
We have a great show for you today. Adam is going to look into whether pit bulls are more aggressive than other dog breeds.
Uh-oh.
No controversy there.
No. And Pat is going to give us another game of Name That. But first, should you rake your leaves? Fresh off from trying to balance eggs, you may have noticed we're in autumn for the past couple weeks here in the Northern Hemisphere. Autumn is also known as fall, after the great fall of man following the eating of the poison fruit of the tree of knowledge. Perhaps it's just the leaves, actually. Well, actually, I was curious about this, and some searching led me to a Government of Canada website that said the word autumn came into general use around the 16th century, replacing the name harvest for the whole season. Autumn is derived from the French, which came from the Latin autumnus, the Roman name for this season. Fall, on the other hand, is a Germanic word that came into use around the 16th century. It's also thought to refer to the season's falling leaves and fruit and to nature's decline as winter approaches.
So they're from around the same era. So neither is more kind of right.
Yeah, it probably depends on where you roll from.
Yes.
This website, which is linked in our show notes at trcpodcast.com,
It's a great website.
said that beginning in the 17th century, English-speaking immigrants took both words of them to the New World. In North America, fall became the more common word, while autumn gained the upper hand in Britain as well as in Australia and New Zealand. In general, then, Americans usually say fall, and the British say autumn, and Canadians say both.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Well, with that etymological exploration out of the way, many leaves certainly fall in fall, so what should you do about them? Most people rake all their leaves, put them in bags, and these bags are magically taken away to the land of rainbows and fairies.
Sometimes you keep the bags because they have like that pumpkin face on it, and you put them up in front.
Oh, yes, of course.
It's a good one.
Actually, the National Wildlife Federation, who cited a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency source, said leaves and other yard debris account for more than 13% of the U.S.'s solid waste, a whopping 33 million tons a year.
Wow.
13% for the year?
Wow.
Wow, not just for like October. That's
Yeah.
that is
Now,
considerable.
it is, solid waste in the broad sense, leaves and other yard debris, right? So there could be other things.
debris.
But yeah, and these are U.S. numbers, so we'll just assume we'll just drop it by, 90% for Canada.
I mean, I've done yard work in my yard, a few times in the last couple of years, and like if you're putting trees down, you're digging out grass, and there's a lot of dirt and there's clay and stuff that ends up at the curb, and that can be a large volume. Sort of leaves aside.
Or it could be the weight. Leaves aren't that heavy.
Yep.
Larger volume.
Yep.
There often isn't enough oxygen to decompose all this organic matter, and that can lead to the release of methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. Of course, the problem is compounded because most of the debris from yards is placed in plastic bags or other non-biodegradable packaging. So it's all squished in there. In fact, says the National Wildlife Federation, solid waste landfills are the largest U.S. source of man-made methane, and that's aside from the carbon dioxide generated by gas-powered blowers and trucks used in leaf disposal.
Sheesh.
But if you get your leaves and you put them in those sort of compostable bags and put them out for Green Day, that's better, I assume?
Yeah, that would just be the transaction cost, we'll say, of moving them back and forth versus the likely buildup of gaseous products. Now, if you aren't concerned about the environment for these reasons, or you're pursuing another method like Adam said, what about selfish reasons about raking? Well, the Weather Network interviewed Canadian gardening expert and best-selling author Mark Cullen, and he said, quote, "Think about how much work this would save you if you're not raking leaves up and putting them in a plastic bag or a craft paper bag, and we so often use now for disposing of our leaves, then hauling those bags down to the curb of the driveway and leaving them for the municipality to pick up. You just saved yourself all that work, and you just saved the municipality the expense of doing it." So, what, just let them fall where they do and do nothing? Don't the fallen leaves act as a fertilizer for the soil? Yes, it turns out they do. Fallen leaves can provide the earth with a natural source of carbon. Yummy. But Cullen says this isn't quite the right move. And this is his advice, quote, "Don't leave dead leaves on your grass, because when leaves fall on your lawn, they cut out rays of sunshine and can cause brown spots to occur. Instead, you should rake them into your garden. If the surface of your garden has leaves, they can be meal for earthworms. They come to the surface and pull them back down up to a meter deep and eat them. Their digestion and life cycle adds both nitrogen and microbes to the soil, which is great for garden health." Cullen also adds, quote, "Now, if you really want to be efficient about this, you'd run your lawnmower over the leaves a couple of times, break them down into tiny pieces, and rake the mulch of the leaves onto your garden. This way, leaves break down and become incorporated with the soil much quicker." So there you have it. Don't rake your leaves on your lawn, but rake them to your garden. Problem solved? Well, what about those people who have no garden, or their garden is much smaller than the amount of leaves they have, which is almost everyone I've ever met?
Sure.
Here are some tips from the National Wildlife Federation. You can make compost. You can combine the fallen leaves with grass clippings and other green material and keep moist and well mixed. You'll have nutrient-rich compost to add to your garden next spring. Mm-hmm. Still too many leaves? You can share them with neighbors, friends, schools, and others. Who doesn't want your leaves? They're only just everywhere.
What are you doing? I'm just helping your garden, bro.
Exactly. So other people could have some compost. Or you could build a brush shelter. Along with branches, sticks, and stems, leaves can be used to make brush piles that shelter native wildlife.
Now, I'll get right on that.
Yeah, in downtown Toronto or downtown Ottawa. Exactly.
That's awesome.
Now, if you're in the city, you probably put some of them in bags, and they'll have to go to landfill. And you're not going to build happier places for raccoons to come and eat your garbage. So you're going to have to rake some leaves. At least put them in biodegradable bags of some type or another. Yeah. It does seem a bit unavoidable. I mean, you could cut down your tree in the first place, but that also seems like a bad way to go.
I guess it depends how many leaves you have. I live in a fairly new neighborhood, and the only older tree near my house died before I moved in, so I don't really get that many leaves right now. But if you live in an older neighborhood with very mature trees, this can be a big problem, and it'll just cover your grass. Right?
I'm trying to picture someone who has a small tree and a massive garden where this actually works in terms of the number of leaves per garden ratio.
Yeah. That depends on the type of tree too. You got a maple tree, it's game over. You're inundated in leaves.
Oh, yep.
Our entire backyard is maple tree.
Oh, yeah.
We're always picking up those little helicopters in the house because Holden brings them in his tail. There's so many of them out there.
Christina just mentioned their very cute dog, but some people think other dogs are not so cute. The Pitbull. Is it dangerous? Is it safe? Adam, what's the deal?
Montreal has recently enacted a citywide Pitbull ban. This decision was precipitated by a Pitbull attack this June, which resulted in the death of 55-year-old Christiane Vadnet. The city already planned to update such laws by 2018, but they fast-tracked the change following that attack. What exactly does this involve? The ban affects pit bulls, which it defines as Staffordshire Bull Terriers, American Pit Bull Terriers, American Staffordshire Terriers, and any mix of these breeds. And this includes any dog that presents characteristics of one of those breeds. Now, this last point is very contentious for many who claim it is vague. What really counts as a pit bull? Current owners need to obtain a special permit by the end of the year, which will cost them $150. Dogs who are not registered by the end of the year or are deemed dangerous could be euthanized. Doesn't mean they absolutely will, but they could, is the idea. And owners must prove that their dog has been sterilized, microchipped, and vaccinated by March 1st of next year. Owners must also prove that they have no criminal record. As of October 3rd, which was Monday, it is meant to be illegal to acquire a pit bull dog. And when outside of their home, any pit bull type dog must be muzzled and kept on a 1.25 meter leash. That's about 4 feet. After objections to these rules, they were suspended on Monday, which was the day they were supposed to be implemented, and these will be assessed at a later date. I've heard that they may be assessed on Wednesday. It is Tuesday when we're recording this show, but I guess we'll see the specifics as the story develops. The delay seems to be caused by the difficulty in identifying the Pitbull type dog and some contention over what that is. Now, the summer's Pitbull attack also prompted a ban in Quebec City. A Pitbull ban has been in place here in Ontario since 2005. And the province of Quebec may be implementing a similar ban in the future. Many areas in the US and Canada have similar bans. It's not that rare. It should be noted there are also about 20 states, I believe, in the US that have rules against this kind of ban. So there are people on sort of both sides of this legally. I moved from Ottawa in Ontario to Gatineau in the province of Quebec a few years ago. Pit bulls are legal there, and I have some friends with pit bulls or similar dogs. I see them when I'm out and about all the time. It's important to note that almost any animal advocacy group, this includes the Montreal SPCA and the Humane Society, are opposed to the ban. So if you consider them to have some sort of authority over this matter, and you want to go with what they're thinking, there aren't many advocacy groups that are going with this. The general sentiment of those in opposition can be summed up by catchphrases like, punish the deed, not the breed. There's a lot of blame for bad owners, for poorly behaved dogs, and they're saying it's not the fault of the breed itself.
And to be fair, it rhymes, so it's true.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of people claim that the breed-specific bans are unscientific. Oh, unscientific? This is great. This gives me something to work with. That's what we like on the show. So I thought, I've got no real pony in this race. Let's look into this non-controversial issue and see what it's like.
Is it really fair to compare ponies to dogs, Adam?
When people talk about racing dogs, they talk about ponies, don't they? Or is that more horses? I don't know. So really it boils down to a simple question at its core. Are pit bulls more aggressive than other dogs? This was a question that listener Tim Fletcher asked us years ago, and at the time the question was avoided to avoid controversy, but to hell with it. We could always use a few more emails, right? Gaston Vadnet, whose wife was killed by the pit bull attack back in June, said about the ban, "Thank you to those who dealt with it. We don't want Christiane to be a statistic." Well, I'm sorry, Gaston, but we're going to have to look at those numbers. Now, it isn't always easy to determine specifics here. There is no single specific registry of all dog attacks sorted by breed. Sometimes there are numbers for bites, but no specific breeds, or at other times, an attack will only be reported when there's a hospital visit or police report. So much to say, Statistics Canada doesn't have data on every cat scratch and chihuahua bite. Most minor attacks will not be serious enough to be reported or tracked at all, and this can explain some of the disparity in some of the breeds that are mentioned in some of these studies. Montreal Mayor Denis Coderre stated that pit bull type dogs make up 4.6% of Montreal's dogs, but were implicated in 32% of bites reported to police in 2015. That would be 137 bites out of 426. For other statistics, I don't always have the numbers for how many dogs in the affected areas are pit bulls, but I see the number 6% thrown around a lot. More specific numbers are sometimes lower, such as the Montreal 4.6% I mentioned earlier, and a number that I saw from Boston that was 3%. A study from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia analyzed dog bites over a 5-year period from April 2001 to December 2005. They studied a total of 551 patients and found that pit bull terriers caused 51% of those injuries. Rottweilers caused 8.9, and a mix of those two breeds caused another 6. So about 2/3 were caused by pit bulls, Rottweilers, and mixes of the two. Further, we need to mention that not all bites are equal. We can accept from the above numbers that those that are noted are more serious. Beyond that, a 2011 study from the Annals of Surgery measured trauma and emergency surgery services data of 228 dog bite patients, where 82 had the breed identified and 29 were pit bulls. That's about 35%. It was determined that attacks by pit bulls were associated with a higher median injury severity scale score, a higher hospital charge, that being $10,500 versus the average $7,200, and a higher risk of death, that being 10.3% versus 0%. There are some myths about their jaws locking in some specific way that aren't completely validated, but their jaws are strong, and they are among the stronger jaws of all dogs. I don't believe they are the single strongest, but they're very strong. An often cited study in this controversy comes from the Journal of the American Veterinary Medicine Association, which was published in the year 2000. It studied 20 years of dog bite-related fatalities from 1979 to 1998. There were 238 deaths by 403 dogs, and a bit over half of those were caused by pit bull type dogs and Rottweilers. Now, one claim that we hear a lot is that a lot of other cities are repealing the ban, and why is Montreal doing this? A lot of other cities have tried it, and they're not doing it anymore. Well, Boston repealed its Pit Bull Ownership Act in 2012, and since then, pit bull bites have increased. In 2011 and 2012, before the repeal of the ban, bites were 20 to 21% for pit bulls, and then in 2013 and 2014, bites were 30% and 32% from pit bulls, so they have gone up a bit.
But doesn't that make complete sense? If you couldn't have a pit bull, then they would go down, and if you can't have a pit bull again, they would go up?
Of course.
Yeah.
So they're not saying they're not necessarily saying bites in general have gone up, but bites from pit bulls go up when you allow pit bulls to be owned.
Right, but not overall bites are not necessarily increasing. Also, it seems like the numbers in Boston are using absolute, and we don't know if the city size is increasing.
Yeah, so there is better data. So there isn't a ton of data to compare sort of before and after breed legislation rates. And opponents of the ban will argue that the science doesn't support the ban. They're not so much saying, here we have science that shows that the ban doesn't cause a reduction. More they're saying, well, the numbers aren't out there to support it, so we can't say that it's supported by evidence. That said, Manitoba does have some numbers, and the University of Manitoba crunched them very well in a 2012 study. They implemented breed-specific legislation starting in Winnipeg in 1990, and bans of pit bull-type dogs took place in various cities up to 2006, and the data was studied from 1984 to 2006 within 16 jurisdictions where there were bans. They basically distilled the data down to person years at risk to give an equivalent metric of the risk of dog bites before and after the implementation of a ban in specific areas. Provincially, the number of dog bites resulting in hospitalization reduced significantly from 3.47 bites per 100,000 person years before to 2.84 bites per 100,000 person years after. That's significant, and the ban was particularly effective in reducing dog bite injuries in people under the age of 20. That was specifically measured in Winnipeg. Now, there is criticism of the Ontario ban that states that following the 2005 Pitbull ban, there are more bites than ever, as one article I saw stated. The graphs showing the number of bites per year in Toronto aren't very conclusive, showing large variance year per year, with a slight increase only in 2014. Severity of injury was also not mentioned, which to me is a very important thing to consider. So to me, it sounds like Pitbull-type dogs are more dangerous. They are responsible for more reported bites, they cause more injury when they do bite, and are more likely to cause death. This is a dog breed that was designed to fight, so them being aggressive does not go against sort of the basic assumptions we might make. But is it right to say that it's the owner, not the dog, that should be responsible? This is partly a values decision, but one we can also use some logic to deconstruct. Many feel that prejudice against pit bulls is racism, while some people flat out say this is dog racism. Most people don't make the comparison, but I still feel that this attitude may be at the core of the mentality behind a lot of the pit bull defense. Language about targeting the breed or being unfair to certain breeds always comes up, and to me this seems like anthropomorphizing dogs. In humans, we can demonstrate that despite small genetic variations between races of people, the variation between individuals in a racial group is much greater. This has been mentioned on the show before to make the point that the concept of race doesn't have much validity in a biological sense. We're all humans, we're all very close. These differences between us aren't significant. Beyond this, there's this basic idea we have as people that everyone is equal in the eyes of the law. This isn't practically true, as well. We're all born with different physical and mental qualities and abilities, but in ideal circumstances, we are all given equal opportunities. Again, in practice, this isn't always true, as people are born into rich or poor families, socioeconomic circumstances, but this is basically the goal of our society. These are values which we respect, and humans learn and apply knowledge learned over life much differently than a dog. Dogs don't learn like we do, and they don't have memories that work like we do. They aren't accountable for their actions in the same way that we are. Dogs aren't people. Dog breeds are not equivalent to human racial groups. We're all human, and all dogs are all dogs, but dog breeds from one to another have significant differences, both physical and mental. To follow human racial analogies, we very openly treat dog breeds differently, where we shouldn't with people. Imagine hiring a nanny and looking for a racial group that is good with kids. It's perfectly normal and accepted to do that when looking for a pet. It's not socially acceptable to say you're looking for a specific racial group in hiring for a job, looking for a mate, or renting out a room. People still do it, but it's not really something that we respect in our society. But the same is not true for dogs. People target specific breeds when they want a pet. There's nothing wrong with that. This is something that is acceptable in our society. We do discriminate between dog breeds. That's perfectly normal. It's not the equivalent to human race-based discrimination, which is unjustified. All this said, there is a factor to the owner, no doubt. certain kinds of owners may be drawn to specific kinds of dogs, and this may account for a bit of the aggressiveness of pit bulls. But the numbers are so drastically disproportionate to the population of pit bulls among dogs that this can't really be the only cause. A well-trained pit bull type dog will be much less likely to attack a person, but realistically, many people will not do a great job of training their dog no matter what sort of rules or policies are in place. A poorly trained Chihuahua won't kill a person. A poorly trained pit bull might. All said, pit bulls aren't the only dangerous dogs, but they stick out quite a bit when we look at the stats. German Shepherds, for example, are also responsible for a lot of serious injuries, and this is likely largely due to the fact that it is a very common breed, but it should be considered when adopting a dog, especially one that might be around children. As for the argument that it's hard to identify a pit bull, this is really a practical issue. If an owner claims their pit bull mix isn't a pit bull, it's not practical to do a DNA test, but identifying it by look is easily what could be done. Memes about people identifying Bambi or a truck as a pit bull aren't really based in reality. All this said, I don't want to sound like I'm supporting any specific rules or any specific policies here. A disproportionately large percentage of dogs showing up in shelters are pit bulls, and breed-specific legislation can result in those dogs being euthanized. I am not a fan of putting a healthy animal down, and I appreciate the importance of education and responsible pet ownership. That said, I'm seeing a lot of misinformation when it comes to pit bulls. The statistics seem to indicate that pit bulls are more aggressive, and when people say breed-specific legislation goes against the science, that doesn't really seem to be backed up by the statistical data.
Good coverage, Adam. As you said, it's a very nuanced, complicated issue. We don't really have the data we want at all. So just to reiterate, it'd be nice to know like all dog bites, right? And then you want the severity of dog bites. And then you want the ratio of the type of dog to dog bites.
So some of those numbers are out there. I didn't want to get into all the specifics on the show. But like German Shepherd, that's why I mentioned German Shepherds.
Yeah, but there's no way. Because as you said, if the bite's not severe enough, why would they track it? It's like it's like a bike accident, which no one reports. And you're like, well, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe
right?
Chihuahuas account for 90% of bites, but we would never know because they almost never go to the emergency.
Right, and as you said, if a breed is more common, there should be more bites, right?
Yeah.
As well, given the variance of dogs from the little to the big that we've bred in different ways, it makes sense that one of them is going to be the most aggressive than others.
Yes.
It's whether that's a significant outlier. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's a cluster with the Pit Bull and some other breeds like the German Shepherd and the Rottweiler and whatnot.
And it makes sense that be a stronger breed of dog.
Exactly. And as you said, it could be that the people who are inclined to have those types of animals treat them differently, or maybe it isn't. And the dog is like a 10% more likely to bite people, but that translates into 30% more actual bites that actually have severity. The other aspect is how a community goes about making decisions, or people in political power and legislative bodies. And so it's obviously up to the community. It is their right to make decisions however they seem fit, although, of course, we at the show advocate evidence-based reasoning as much as possible. So it would be nice to have a clearer discussion that if it was the case that pit bulls are 5% more aggressive, then we still want to ban them. And if people say yes, then that's a yes, right?
Yeah, what's your threshold? Is it twice as aggressive? Or
and is it two minority communities making larger claims? Like the people who have pit bulls obviously have a vested interest.
Yes.
People who have been attacked by pit bulls or are scared of them have a vested interest. But does that mean there's 80% in the middle who are just like, whatever? or is it really quite different where most people do have an opinion where they actually talk to their municipal representative or their city councilor or whoever it might be to actually have some sort of enacted legislation? I'm not sure, but I am pretty sure that most people probably just have their opinion. They have no facts. And it turns out it's harder to get them, which makes it even worse.
I look forward to seeing the emails you get and respond to that. All right, here we go with another edition of everyone's favorite mostly guessing game, Name That. This week we play Name That, the leading producer edition. It's a shorter game today. We have 3 questions with a tiebreaker question if required. As usual, I'll give you a piece of information and then ask you to name that from the choices provided. We'll rotate the order, and I've randomly chosen who will go first. A bit of a twist today. I want 2 answers from each of you.
Uh-oh.
What the hell?
You'll get 1 point for identifying the top producer and half a point for identifying the number 2 producer. You need to identify the country's positions correctly. So, for example, if you identify the top 2 producing countries, but in the wrong order, you get nothing.
Wow. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay.
All
I
right.
thought it was going to be music producers, and now I hear it's countries. I feel better about my
Thought
chances.
movie producers.
Good thing, Darren, because you're up first. According to 2013 data from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, what country produces the most potatoes? Darren, you're up. Name that. Is it A, China, B, the United States, C, Ireland, or D, India?
That's a great question, Pat. You picked like some of the big ones in there, and then you stuck in the potato Irish people. Potatoes. Oh boy. U.S. and China.
Darren says the U.S. and China. Next is Adam.
I feel that Ireland is the obvious answer that must be wrong. There are a butt ton of people in India, so I'm going to go with India number 1 because I believe it is included in Indian foods, and I will go number 2 U.S. Go Idaho.
Adam says D and B, and lastly is Christina.
I'm going to say D and B as well. India and U.S., correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
China is the top producer, India is number 2, the Russian Federation is number 3, and Ukraine is number 4.
Wow.
Since 2007, China has led the world in potato production, and nearly a third of the world's potatoes are harvested in China and India. The U.S. is the number 5 producer.
Whoa.
Canada is number 16.
Interesting.
So no one gets any points for that.
Boo.
Question number 2. According to data from 2014, which country is the largest producer of uranium? Adam, name that. Is it A, Australia, B, Kazakhstan, C, the United States, or D, Canada?
Look, I'm looking at Adam's face, and it's amusing.
I'm going to go the first one. I'll say Canada because I feel like I've seen a sign that said no uranium mine somewhere in Canada. And then number 2 producer would be Australia because it's a friggin' huge country. So they got to have something in the ground there.
Next is Christina.
I don't like that I'm leaning towards all of Adam's answers. I'm going to say I'm Canada first.
Okay.
Australia. I'm going to say the same thing.
Okay, so you agreed with Adam.
Yeah.
And lastly, Darren.
Kazakhstan and Canada.
Oh, Mr. Poppy Pants there. You sounded very sure of yourself.
No, I'm just taking a shot.
And Darren is quite correct in both of his answers.
Boom!
Number 1, Kazakhstan with 41%. Number 2, Canada with 16%. Number 3, Australia with 9%. And number 4, Niger with 7%. The U.S. is number 8, producing 3.4% of the world's uranium.
Pat, does that mean Kazakhstan is more than the next 4 combined?
Yes.
Wow.
Going into the last question, I have Darren with 1.5 points, Adam with 0, and Christina with 0.
All right.
Last question, still anyone's game. According to data from 2015, which country is the largest producer of motor vehicles? This includes passenger cars, light commercial vehicles, minibuses, trucks, buses, and coaches. Christina, name that. Is it A, Japan, B, Korea, C, the United States, or D, China?
I'm going to say B, Korea and United States.
Christina says B and C. Next is Darren.
This is interesting because it makes me reflect on producing means it's specifically produced in that country, even though it may be owned somewhere else, right? China and the U.S.
Darren says D and C. And lastly is Adam.
Number 1 U.S. Number 2 Japan.
And once again, Darren completely nails both answers.
That was lucky, but I'll take it.
Number 1 is China with 2.4 million. Number 2 is the U.S. with 12 million. Canada is number 10 with 2.3 million.
So I get half a point?
So to end the game, I have Darren with 3 points, Adam with 0 points, and Christina with 0.5.
In your face, Adam.
Christina says in your face, as opposed to 6 times over in your face, Christina. Well, I feel this win is just a reward for my 8 years of service to this podcast. Somewhat amusingly, I started on the show about 8 years ago, and it's been an absolutely fantastic time. Thanks for the crew, and of course, thanks to all the listeners for letting me still be here. And thank you for joining us once again. Until next time, think better, act better.
Peace out, Cuboids.
Stay classy, not smartassy.
I saw the ultrasound, so it's official. So congratulations, Adam and Vera,
Yes.
on becoming pregnant.
Thank you.
Future Papa. For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Oh, takes.
We're going to ask Holden to go first.
Row.
Man.
Did you eat the cat's food?